Hi, everyone. Welcome to What Would Cynthia Do? Hi, Lenise. I'm so glad you're here. It's really great to see you here live. Whoever else is here, please say hi in the chat. I love to know who's joining us. And you can do our special What Would Cynthia Do intro format, which is name, pronouns, what you do, and one ask and one offer. I'm Cynthia Pong, for those of you who don't already know. Most of you probably do. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a feminist career strategist. Wow, so much to talk about today. We're going to be talking about leadership styles, but before we get to that, my ask is that you say hi in the chat, and I want to check in with everybody today, given what is happening in the world, specifically Atlanta, of course. Also, you can tell people that they can tune in at What Would Cynthia Do? So that's it. I don't know if that's an ask or an offer. It's kind of both. And my additional offer is that you can always watch these. There's a couple of days delay for me to upload them, but the replays, you can always find them on my YouTube as well as on whatwouldcynthiado.com. Okay, let me see who's here. Hi, Tamara. Hello. Let me go back to the intros thing. So yeah, drop into the chat. Tell me how you're doing, who's here. I'm gonna roll right into it because today is one of those days. I posted this on Twitter earlier, and this week was like going really good for me personally. And like, Monday and Tuesday were like slower days. Hey, Lucic, thanks for joining. I wasn't overbooked like I normally am, so I was really like loving this week. And then last night I had this dream. I posted about it on Twitter. I had a dream about gun violence, and like cop gun violence, so state sanctioned police violence. And I figured it was because I've been thinking a lot. It's been a year since Breonna Taylor was murdered. Still no justice for her family in any real kind of way. I figured it was that. And then I woke up to the news of the shooting in Atlanta. And so, my day became a bit, Lucy, because like I'm exhausted being a woman. Yeah. It's so real. I was just talking to a friend of mine because I've had a lot of friends then reach out and be like, are you okay? How's your family? And they're like all my Black friends, by the way, who have just been like really rallying to like make sure that I'm doing okay. And I have to think that that is not a coincidence. It's because they're so used to these type of attacks being against them as well in their communities. Hi, Rakisha. Thank you so much for joining. This is a bit of side tangent, but everybody should follow Rakisha because Rakisha does these amazing weekly roundups where just like compiling all these resources, free events, tools, things that people can check out for the week ahead. And Rakisha has tagged me a few times in those. I'm grateful for spreading the word about What Would Cynthia Do? So follow Rakisha, everyone. And yes, thank you for coming, Carla. Indeed, everyone can tune in at What Would Cynthia Do? So yeah, I do want to check in with everybody. How are you, all of you doing, with this latest spate of violence and shootings? I also have been proceeding with the rest of my day. Like I've still had meetings and like different things, and I know people are like continuing with their lives and everything as we do, because what else can you do sometimes? But let me know if you want to like process together, if you want to talk about what's happening. I posted on LinkedIn about some of my feelings about this stuff and how it's all just like any type of violence against any community, especially any community of color, or any other marginalized community, is like an attack on all of us, and we have to understand that they're all intertwined in the same systemic oppression. So anyway, I'm happy to have a longer how are we doing if you all want to process that together. I also am still really excited about talking about leadership styles. And I do want to say that last week, instead of What Would Cynthia Do? As many of you probably already know, we had our first inaugural episode of The Conversation. So air horn for that, because it was really great. And thank you to anyone who came and all of you who joined. that one because I was sitting down with the first time I did a live with Ashley Watkins, resume writer extraordinaire, also a former recruiter, and Dr. Lisa Orbe Austin, imposter syndrome expert and executive coach. So yeah, that was a really great kickoff. We'll be back in April on Lisa's LinkedIn Live to talk about job search, especially for middle management positions, executive C-suite positions, because it's kind of a different ballgame once you get into that level. So we'll be discussing job search and all aspects thereof with respect to that niche. Yes, I think this is Rakisha again, but yeah, sometimes you do have to disconnect a bit to avoid the triggering. And you know, everybody I think has their own ways of processing and or dealing and or coping mechanisms, you know, healthy or not, to be honest, to deal with spates of like racial violence and or any kind of violence. So yeah, I hope everyone is getting the space they need. I will also say that because it's the spring equinox, like timing is kind of great in this respect, but I had signed up for a friend, a colleague, Natalie Orozco's spring equinox ceremony. So I'm going to be doing that for like 6 hours on Saturday. And I'm really, really happy to make the time because I know I don't have the best self-care, as a lot of you all know. I tend to just work a lot. And so I'm happy to have that space on Saturday where I can just like be in a community of really like intentional people, think about some of the bigger questions, like reground myself, like do a lot of that big picture reflection at this time. So I don't know, is anyone else doing anything for the spring equinox or like, I don't know, anything you're looking forward to in the next week or so? I'm also going on vacation at the end of the month, the week of March 29th. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, Lenice, 100%, it is exhausting. And I meant to say this before, but I think I didn't even finish my thought. Like I was telling one of my friends who checked in on me that it's even exhausting thinking about how exhausting this is as a person of color or as a woman of color, because it's like, these are added things that you have to think about in your day. Like someone who is a totally, you know, disconnected white person has the privilege of like completely just like not thinking about or not engaging with this, you know, event. And like, they might just proceed with their Wednesday as usual, right? Like keep hitting those KPIs and like keep doing their work without a thought at all of their whiteness or their privilege or their role in a society in which this stuff happens repeatedly. And then when this does happen, of course, it affects not only those who are directly like impacted by it, like injured, killed, traumatized by witnessing it, their families, the Atlanta community in general, but also like as another person of color, you know, it just reverberates in a different way. And we have like, I think the weight on us can be more because of our very heightened sense of being from a marginalized community in this country. And yeah, like, no, Lucic, I don't think you're the only one feeling a lot of misogyny and sexism lately. It also is Women's History Month. So I think things like might be coming up because of that. I think there's also like just backlash anytime that we are uplifting any group that's not like white men, and that's not serving like white patriarchy. There's pushback on that. And I also will say that like Women's History Month also can be very triggering for, say, Black folks who just had Black History Month, and like in the ways that was not at all respected. It did not have the same type of maybe institutional support or just like funding and like attention and kind of just like, just a very different, I mean, this is another reason why I hate these like days and months, and I've blogged about this. I've talked about it on here. You know, I think that it's complicated how we sort of do these things. Hey, Lenice has nothing specific for the equinox, but yes, that's, I think a while back when we were doing the self-care episode, maybe it was you, Lenice, who was saying like the carving out time for you and your husband to do the date nights is a practice of yours, I think, or one that you were trying to bring back. And I was saying how great that was. So I love that you're going on a double one. just going out to eat, like even that, like even making the plan, I think has this psychological benefit for us. And like I talk a lot about career change, like my book is about career change, right? I've done career change myself. And in there, I talk about the benefits of like psychologically planning something that's like a respite for you or something that you're doing for yourself. That can be even more beneficial. A vacation, like the thing I'm doing on Saturday, like the lead up to it and the excitement and just like knowing that that date is coming can be even more beneficial than the thing itself. So making plans like these, Lenise, I think is like crucial, because not only are you setting aside time and intentionally prioritizing that part of your life, you have all the lead up time to be like excited about it and like plan about it or think about it here and there. I think that the psychological lift of that is super powerful. And we shouldn't underestimate that. So I'm going to give you some applause for you for doing that one. And hopefully we all can follow in your footsteps. Let's see what Lucic has said. I was hosting a Clubhouse room yesterday and had a conversation about sexual assault and got feedback from a man in the audience that it wasn't inclusive and entertaining enough. Okay. I mean, this is clearly coming from someone who is used to the world catering to their every whim. Like being entertaining, like why would that even be a word that you would associate with a conversation about sexual assault? Okay, don't even get me started. I need to drink some water. Whew. Exactly that, Rakisha. What? I mean, that just tells you like where a little bit about the point of view of where this person was coming from, and how that kind of a response is so disturbing and just so underscores how much work we have to do in this world, like how much work white people need to do, how much work white men need to do to call each other in, because this type of shit is not acceptable, not inclusive enough. Hello, with the reason we have like, this is my whole rant about like months and days and like International Women's Day and like Black History Month and Asian API Heritage Month and all this stuff is like, we each like have our little like months and we're supposed to be like happy with that. And like the little amount of funding we might get for our ERG, like for that, like we're supposed to be like, oh, thank you. Whereas the whole entire rest of the year is white man's day, white man's year, white man's world. So that's what gets me so riled up. And I feel like this reaction is an exact example of how does some man come in and be like, this isn't inclusive enough. It's not entertaining for me, and therefore has no value, right? Or therefore should be improved. Like there's some type of lack. Oh, all right. Anyway, feel free to continue to respond to what happened to Lucic in the chat, but I think that's a complete like exhibit A of all of what is sort of wrong with the world that we live in. Okay, let me move it right along at the same time. And I do want to give enough time for us to talk about our topic of the day, which is, yes, I have a fancier drum roll for you all now. Hope you enjoyed that. Our topic of the day is leadership styles. So I want to talk about leadership styles and why it's important to know what yours is, help us all talk through like what we think our leadership styles are currently, and if applicable, like where you might want to move it to. So as always, and yes, Tamora, totally disgusting reaction, totally. Oh, I deleted my banner. I got a little over aggressive cleaning up my banners, and the one that I wanted now is gone. Okay, anyway, I'm going to talk about this for the next 5 or 10 minutes. Drop your questions and your thoughts in the chat because I'm going to come back to it periodically. And yeah, let's dive into this. I'm going to share screen and show you some stuff that I came up with. Okay, so leadership styles. This is my favorite tool to use for talking about leadership styles. Oh wait, hold on. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. Okay. First, I should say, why is it important to know what your leadership style is? I go through this a lot with different clients who want to like focus on improving their leadership, whether it's in a kind of traditional institutional organization job, or in your entrepreneurial work, or in your community work. It could be in any of those ways, right? You could have different leadership styles for different kind of pillars of your life, and I'll share what mine are. But it can be helpful to know because it just gives you some insight into what your tendency tends to be right now, and then also like some of the pros and cons of that. So you might have certain blind spots if you have a particular leadership style. So it's important to be like aware of those, you know, and it can just be very illuminating. So that's why I think it's important to do this. This is just another bit of insight to have into yourself. And then also, like, if you imagine that, oh, I want to be this kind of a leader actually, and in fact, right now I'm over here, like, how can you change your the way that you lead to be more in the style that you want? So that's the two reasons why it's important to think about this stuff. So I'm going to share my graphic again. So this is from, this graphic is from Indeed, from this article here. If you just Google Indeed.com and 10 common leadership styles, you'll find it. And the graphic is down here. But I put it here so we can talk about it today. So there are 10 types that Indeed breaks it down into, and I find these the most helpful, so that's why I use it. Number one is like a coach who's motivational. Number two is a visionary who's progress focused and inspirational long term. The servant style, which is humble and protective of others. Very common amongst a lot of my clients, by the way, a lot of women of color. Autocratic style is authoritarian and results focused. Number 5 is laissez-faire or hands-off, autocratic and delegatory. This is actually me in my work, like me in Embrace Change with my team. I'm super delegatory and so hands-off. 6 is democratic, so supportive and innovative. You're like gathering everyone's opinion. Pace setter is number 7. That's helpful and motivational, thinking about deadlines, hitting milestones. 8 is transformational, challenging and communicative. This one is similar to coach, but it folds in more of the focus is on the organizational progress and improvement. 9 is transactional, which is performance focused. So like if you hit your marks, you'll get XYZ incentive reward for that. 10 is bureaucratic, hierarchical, and duty focused. This is very common for a lot of the bosses or supervisors or managers of my clients. Okay, so if you look at these, and we're gonna dive into a bit more here. I want you to put in the chat which one you think you are. So I think I'm number 1. I think I'm 1. I've already told you that in my Embrace Change team work and like with people I work with, subcontract with, collaborate with, I'm very number 5, hands off. At the same time, with my clients, I'm super number 1, coach. Makes sense. Like I recognize their strengths, help them set SMART goals, give regular feedback, focus on motivating them to hit their goals. But then like in my speaking and in my workshops and my training and teaching and like things like this, I feel like I'm very much more number 2, visionary. So I'm focused on trying to like inspire others, give them new ideas and try to build their trust around those ideas, ushering in change, fostering confidence in them. So you can see, like, remember I said there's different pillars and you might have different styles in those different areas. This is an example of how I have that, like a couple different things. And like, over time, I feel like I want to become more and more of the number 2 visionary. But we'll see. So tell me in the chat which one of these you think that they are. I will also highlight, so I put in purple the ones that are really common for my clients and other women of color and like people I work with and interact with. A lot of servant style. So your people first, making sure they are personally and professionally fulfilled, because you know that if they're in their best place, they can be their best selves at work, do the best work for the mission, for the clients, for the organization. Number 6 is also a common one. And I know what would Cynthia do regular McKinney is this one, democratic. So always like asking for a lot of input and getting people's opinions, gathering all the feedback, considering it. This one's great because the participatory nature of that gives people high morale, like high employee engagement, high workplace satisfaction is a really great style for a manager or a leader to have as well. And then the coach one we talked about, I think a lot of my clients and people in my community also have this one. The ones in red, I italicize and put in red because these are a lot of times what my clients have to encounter and deal with on the other side of it. Like their supervisor is super focused on rules, procedure, hierarchy. and or this autocratic one, focused on results and efficiency, military-like, expect everybody to just fall in line, follow the orders. So yes, let me check back in with the chat and see where you all think that you are. And also don't just put like where you think you are now. And I also want to know if it's different. Is there one that you want to be more of? All right, so I'll leave this up for another couple of seconds so you can tell me both of those, where you are now, where you want to be. Okay, and then so I'm gonna check in the chat 1 second. And then like if there's ones that like a lot of us are this or whatever, we can dive deeper into the pros and cons of those. Okay, I keep wanting to hit leave studio, which would be bad. Okay, how are we doing? Let me see. These are great. So many comments. Thank you, Lucic and Lenice, for continuing to process what is happening with unhelpful support and stuff. Okay, and yeah, I want to circle back to this one. So let's come back to that in a second, Lenice. Please remind me. Thank you for dropping the link, Carla. This is that link for everyone who wanted that article to read more. And yeah, okay, so a laissez-faire leader, which is what I identify with. And I was not this person, I will just say for full disclosure, but I'm glad that you loved this person. It's great when people working with or under this person are already well-trained, they're self-starters, they know what to do. They really don't need that much kind of like intense training or hand-holding or mentoring or stuff. They can kind of just like take it and run. And that is my style. And then, of course, the replacement was autocratic and bureaucratic. That's one of the worst combos, I think, and very present in a lot of white-dominant, male-dominant industries and organizations. So that sucks. You're really going from one end all the way to the other. And I'm sorry, Rakisha. Yes, Lindy says leaders should almost pay more attention to their subordinates' feedback. Yeah, got to be both two-way thing. All right, so Lucic is 3 and 7, and let me just remind myself. Okay, so 3 is the servant style, which I said was super common. 7 is pace setter, so driving fast results, focused on performance, high standards, holding other people accountable, energizing. That's great. I have a client who's actually super successful, high up in a startup, who is very much number 7, I think. So that's cool. Let me know if, Lucic, you feel good being at 3 and 7, or if there's another one on here that you're like, oh, I want to develop more of a different style. Tomorrow is coach and protect. Cool. So that would be number 1 is the coach style. The protective is, I think, a bit of the servant style. So once again, not a huge surprise there. Again, tell me if you feel like you want to move to a different style, if you're like good being there. Rakisha, number 3 in a team environment, but solo role, I'm in number 2. So this is a good distinction too, right? Because I was saying we can be different in different contexts. Number 2 being the visionary, the one I personally want to be more of like driving long-term change, inspiring other people, getting people to buy into a new idea. Love that in your personal role. Carla's a combo of pace setter and democratic. So number 7 and democratic was 6. So yeah, gathering that feedback and also driving fast change. That's super cool. Lenny says, I'm definitely combo, but by far I'm a servant. Curious if bureaucratic would actually admit to being that way. Yeah, you know, insight into how people are, that's like a whole other question, right? And no, I bet people wouldn't, for the most part, want to admit that, because there also is like kind of this negative feeling to bureaucratic. You know, some people will own that, but like I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily have that insight, which is why I'm like having you all go through this too, because like it's good to have this awareness. And like I think I speak for all of us here in the chat and like regulars. We're also like much more self-aware than a lot of the people we have to deal with. But at the same time, knowing, right, that somebody is a bureaucratic style, like I think there's at least power in that, Lenise, being like, okay, like Mike is going to be super into like X, Y, and Z. And so I need to frame this thing in a way that Mike can hear, because I know that Mike is very obsessed with like the hierarchy and the this and the that, right? So just an example, but Carla would like to be more transformational. Cool. So that was number 8. And that's the one that's like a coach plus you are talking about like moving an organization forward to its organizational goals. So that is cool. Tamara's like me, want to be more visionary. And someone else said that too, I think. But yeah, Lenise, for my business, I would like to be more coach as I gain staff and encourage training development. Yeah, that's great. I think I sort of need that too for more of my internal people, but like it's interesting for me because that's what I do for my work, right? Like the bread and butter of my work is like the coach thing. Like I find that sometimes I get depleted because it is such a, requires a lot of energy and a lot of focus. I get depleted in that area. And then so for like my subcontractors and colleagues and stuff, like I don't necessarily have so much of that energy left. So that's a challenge. Is it strange to be a combo of 3 and 7? I don't think so. I think honestly, you could be any number of combination of these things, or one, or like 1 or 2 or 3. Like it could be together, but it's just cool to think about and be aware of, like I'm saying. And yeah, Carla doesn't think that's weird at all. So I'm glad you all are already at that place. I want to circle back real quick to this feedback point Lenise was making. And yeah, I think for all of us, it's important to gather and hear feedback. I also think that sometimes like feedback is really, can often be much more of a reflection of the person giving the feedback than the person receiving it. So you also want to be wary of that. Like take things with a grain of salt, like I have a lot of clients who like, they might get some negative feedback and they think it's really bad on them, or they got to change the whole thing of how they do things. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's really like, that other person giving the feedback, we have to really take into account where they're coming from before you decide if it is valid or not. And it has nothing to do for me with being like where in the power hierarchy you are. Like it could be coming from below, it could be coming from above. That to me is like a separate question from the validity of the thing. It's really just analyzing and being like thoughtful about like and analytical about like who is saying this, like why might they be saying this, like does it really mean that I need to change? If so, in what ways? And like, and in what ways am I not going to change? And then like, what will I then do as a leader to talk to that person and explain or like not explain, It's very like, to me, it's a very situational. And Lucic said, are your differences driven by environment, solo versus team versus organizational culture? Do you mean differences? Like what kind of differences? I'm not remembering the antecedent of that. So tell me what that is and I can speak more on that too. And Rakisha said, I'm very protective of my team, but want results and love motivating people. Oh wait, sorry, Lucic said that. So yeah, I mean, I think for all of us, it could be, it's so personal to our personality, what stage of our career we're in, what we have experienced as like from past leaders also has, I think, really impacted how we want to be in the world, or like how we look up to different people. Like, who was it who was saying before, like I had, Rakisha had a great leader. And then like, you had this other example. So those things all impact how we show up as leaders. So just think about like, if you want to be, like I saw a lot of us had 3. So we should know. I'm going to share my screen for 1 second. You should know that for number 3, here's some of the challenges, right? You can become burnt out because you put the needs of the team above your own. You might have a hard time being authoritative when you need to be. And the organization's goals might be at risk if you're only focused on the needs of your immediate team. So think about that, because like burnout's so real, right? Like all of you probably are doing so much more things in your life, right? And working so hard at different things that you just want to really be careful of that. And then also like, yeah, how can you be assertive and authoritative when you need to be? Also, I will say for those of us who want to be, somebody said they wanted to be more coach, like think about how you can kind of put more time into supporting other people to their goals and like checking in on them and like holding them accountable and stuff. And then for those of you who want to be more visionary, like how can you work on your skill set where it's like being able to communicate to people what is this idea and how to garner their support for it, which really I think is like in a way negotiation, a long-term negotiation project. So these are all kind of things to think about as you evolve your own leadership because it's always changing. It's different in different contexts. We've covered that. And you can always choose to become more of X or less of Y, like if that's what you want. So differences being, okay. So that like, I think it's driven by, environment and the context. So, like, for example, like I was saying, right, I have 3 different ones. Like I am a different version of me when I show up on here versus like when I'm talking to my team versus when I'm in a coaching session. So that's why like I kind of just, I interact with those different purposes, those different spaces, because they are there for different reasons. So I show up to them in different ways, and that's why I think I have 2 different styles. When you were saying you were both 3 and 7, like I just assumed like at all times you're like a mishmash of 3 and 7, but that may not be the case. And so, just more food for thought. But anyway, we are pretty much at time. I know that Carla dropped the link for you all in the chat, so you can read more about each of those styles and know what the pros and cons are, and kind of like see what maybe your blind spots could be in different areas. Like I'm always thinking like, okay, well, if I'm this, then it means like areas for growth or weaknesses might be Y. So like, let me just be aware of that and know that, like, for example, with my team, like I should just tell them that I'm very hands off so that they know. And if they do need more support, I should be aware of that too, right? So that's an example of just improving our awareness around this. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Lucic, Ratisha, Tamara, Carla, Lanice. So great to see you. Glad your meetings are over. And anyone else who is in here, hopefully I didn't miss anybody. But yeah, on a heavier or more complicated day, it was so great to have some time with all of you and like reset and remember, that we don't have to allow ourselves to be like brought down by certain things. We can take breaks and stuff when we want. And Lucic says now I don't think I'm a 7. I'm not slow to praise. I mean, yeah, like any number of these factors, like if you meet like 9 out of 10, like you still might be that style, right? But like, this is just another way to like know how to talk about your leadership or think about your leadership. So you don't have to take it super word by word and like take it with a grain of salt. And then as we're winding down, I will be back next week at 2 for one more show for March before I'm off on vacay the following week. Next time we're going to talk about how to keep momentum in your career, your business when things are challenging. So we have that to look forward to. And Carla, is there a version of code switching involved when working with different leadership styles? Yeah, I think this might be a little bit of what I was saying when I was like, how do you present someone to a bureaucratic, autocratic leader? Because you have a goal in mind. So how can you get there, right? You might need to reframe what you're saying in order for them to hear it and like approve or like sign off on the funds or whatever it is, right? So yeah, you could think of it as code switching for sure. Possible good question for a new manager. Like about what's your leadership style? Yeah, I think so. And good for all of us who are thinking about like if we were to be asked about our leadership to be able to talk about it. And look, you may or may not choose the 10 the tool that we went through today. Like you totally might decide to talk about it in different vocabulary and language. It's a-okay as well, but this is one framework that you can think about it. So yeah, message me if you have any other topic requests. Tell your friends they can tune in at whatwouldcynthia.do.com. They can see the replay there as well. And I will see you all next week. Thanks for coming. Thanks for participating in the chat. Tell your friends. And next time we'll talk about keeping momentum in your career or business when things are challenging. Thanks so much, Lanice. Bye.